All right. Alrighty. Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to our Library Committee meeting on April 30th, 2024. I will now call on Julie Hale, our committee clerk, to conduct the roll call.
We have regrets from Regional Chair Redmond, Councillor Foxton. No. No, we have regrets from Regional Chair Redmond. Space. Councillor Foxton, are you here? Thank you, Councillor Foxton. Councillor Nowak. Thank you. Chair Salonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Thank you.
I would like to acknowledge the land on which we gather today as the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinnawatin peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, Councillor? Seeing none. For the consent agenda item, does anybody wish to remove the item on the consent agenda? If so, please indicate now. Councillor Nowak? Absolutely, go ahead.
So with regard to the hours of operation, if I'm understanding this correctly, you haven't returned to the pre-pandemic hours. Could you just explain that? I have maybe a follow-up then too. I'm wondering, to extend that a little bit, we are running a nice surplus, and I'm wondering if we can't use some of that surplus to cover some of those hours that we're not running. I'm getting a lot of requests for some Friday hours in Wellesley Town, in the village of Wellesley, and like Friday is a ideal time to be open. You know, people getting books for the weekend and that sort of stuff. So, can we have a look at that?
Yes, that is correct. We are running, we are not back up to pre-pandemic hours, and we will be taking an in-depth review of hours and usage by running statistics. And I absolutely agree about Friday hours. We've done that in St. Clements, and they are indeed very popular. And so that is one of our next steps we will be looking into later this year to run some analysis. It's best to run analysis throughout an entire year because we find that seasonal usage does vary, and we see that in the statistics for heavy use times and low use times. And so we want to take that into consideration. But that is definitely on the top of our action items to look at, especially as we move into creating the library service plan for better library service. And you're right, as we are underspent, that would be a good use of the funds, and to understand the most efficient placement of hours. And we also feel that a cookie cutter approach is not necessarily appropriate. A Friday hours in one branch might not work in other branches, but we will be undertaking an in-depth review. And we will keep committee appraised of that.
Part of that review would be reaching out to the community and trying to do some sort of a survey to see what the potential demand would be.
Yeah, we're considering surveys as part of our library service plan, and we will also be working with township staff as part of our library service plan, because township staff may have input as well in terms of when programs are typically run, or if they have heard from the community about certain service needs. So we will be working with the community as well as township staff to identify best service hours possible for efficient financial running of our library services and public service hours.
So I guess just a quick follow-up. There it is up there. Just a quick follow-up. I mean, ideal time to have that Friday, those Friday hours would probably be before sometime in June. Cottage country people picking up their books to get to the cottage for the weekend and stuff. So if at all possible, that would be highly recommended and highly appreciated. Thanks.
Sorry, I just wanted clarity to Joe's question. So is by June a reasonable timeline to see extended hours happening? Specifically in Wellesley, but I know other areas are looking for more hours as well.
I would like to review exactly where we are with the staffing hours before promising June. but we will definitely review with that in mind, even if it's pilot and we see the uptake.
Okay, do you have an additional question there, Joe? I just see
Well,
that your
just-
mic's still
No,
on.
we'll leave it at that for now, but I'd obviously like to see it sooner rather than later. You know, some sort of a commitment to the extra hours.
Okay.
Councillor Foxman?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I tend to agree with the councillor. I think we should not just do a pilot or anything else. I think we should reach out to the public. Communication to the public through the libraries is essential. It actually draws more in because they have a feeling of control and involvement in the library. So even having survey forms at the desk or posting them on our social media as well with the township, and finding out what does meet the needs of our community, and then coming to some conclusions. So if we started the survey, then we're in May. So if we put out a survey type thing in June with the request to run through the summer months and evaluate those back in September, maybe we'll have a more fulsome view of what was really required by our residents. You can disagree with me.
No, it's not that I'm disagreeing. I'm actually more so just thinking, I know in Wilmot, we're in the middle of our strategic plan, and I know that that has to do with services, among other things. I'm just looking to my CAO. If that's something that we could perhaps look at coordinating, understanding and asking and feedback into the library services. I find often library services are very isolated because of the structure in which they're governed, and I find it a bit frustrating when people, like Mayor Nowak was saying, go to him and ask and request for additional hours, yet there isn't quite a fluid way to get that feedback or to really necessarily engage. I know, of course, the libraries have great access to those who already use the libraries, but I know there's lots of people that could benefit from the great services who have no idea what you guys even offer beyond just a catalog of wonderful books and reading material. So I don't know if CAO Chambers, you could maybe chime in, or even CAO Luigi.
Through you, Chair, we could certainly work with regional staff on some collaborative community engagement regarding library services, either through the strategic planning process or separately through Engage Waterloo Region.
Any other questions or comments at this time then on this particular report? No. Seeing none, I would ask that we approve the consent agenda report as listed. I would need a mover. Moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Shantz. And if you could please vote using the e-scribe. Surprise, that carries. And we will jump into our regular agenda items. 5.1, which is the library financial reports. And I will call on Carol Pfeiffer, our financial analyst, to introduce the report. And I believe Carol's joining us virtually.
Julie, do you mind sharing the report? So the report recommends that the financial results are approved, and there is a surplus of $145,277 that could be allocated to the library capital reserve. Basically, there was a surplus. Expenses were below budget, mainly largely due to lower than budgeted staffing costs. There was delayed opening of the Breslau branch and also temporary vacancies. And then slight lower than budgeted revenue due to lower rentals and programming. We could continue on to page 2. So we have two appendixes, which we could look at. The one is Appendix A, which talks about the operating results, and Appendix B talks about the capital. So if we could go to those, Appendix A. So this again just shows what we were talking about, the surplus. You can see the compensation line was 170,000 below budget. We were slightly over budget on supplies and services and interdepartmental charges, which were some advertising and internet costs. And again, the revenue I mentioned already about the rentals and programming, slightly below budget on grants and slightly above budget contribution from reserves, which was actually money from the equity fund that was unbudgeted. So we had expenses and revenue unbudgeted related to equity, but then we got the contribution from the reserve to cover that. Any questions on the operating part?
Any questions at this time on the operational part? Okay.
Okay, so we can move to Appendix B, please. So this just shows the different capital projects that we had in the capital budget. And you can see that the large one there, the Breslau branch development budget of 120,000, we had only spent about 7,000 at the end of the year, so we've carried that forward to 2024. The radio frequency identification, again, we had a budget of 110,000 there, and that also got carried forward to 2024. And the other items were basically spent at budget or slightly over for the AODA retrofits. So back to the report. So basically, page 2, please. So basically, as mentioned, we have a surplus, which we would like to have allocated to the capital reserve. And then if we do that, the balance in the library capital reserve at the end of the year would be $1,247,152. And we also, just to keep in mind, we also have the North Dumfries Library Capital Reserve from the Taylor bequest. And at the end of 2023, the balance in that is $120,745.
Are there any questions at this time? Mayor Shaw.
Thank you. Two questions. The first one isn't really a budget question, but when is the date, the opening date for Breslau?
We don't have a firm date yet. We're waiting for the shelving to be installed. We anticipate, our vendor had said that it would be 8 to 10 weeks after the purchase order was placed, which was April 11th. So we would anticipate the shelving to be delivered and installed by the end of June. Therefore, we don't want to commit to a date until that shelving is installed, because we have run into provisioning issues in the past. So I am loath to commit myself to a specific date. Once the shelving has been installed, we will be able to commit to an opening date.
I understand your reluctance to commit under those circumstances. Why was the order put in so late?
Because of the size of the order in terms of expense, we wanted to do our due diligence, and we got input from 3 different vendors, and so we wanted to select the best vendor and the best pricing possible, and that took a little time.
It was in the budget for last year, right? Can you expand a little bit on what issues you ran into in getting a vendor?
It was getting responses from the vendors and ensuring that the shelving that we were going to be purchasing was appropriate for the space. And so in the case of the successful vendor, they actually came out and did measurements and did a professional consultation. And to tee that all up took some time after we realized that there were issues with the original shelving shipment that we had been promised that did not transpire.
Okay, and I'm sorry if I should remember all of these details. I don't, but what was the timing on that original shelving then? And why did it fall through? Or is that something we need to go in a close to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. My second question then is a budget question, and that is the capital reserve. Can you remind me what uses that is for?
Well, part of it is for books and that type of thing, but it's a small percentage because the books are partially funded by the operating fund. And then the growth part is funded from RDC and a little bit from capital reserve. There's also trying to remember what the name of there's another small capital project for like furnishings, those type of things come out of it. I believe when we did the library headquarters, some of that came out of the capital reserve. And when we've had, I think furnishings for some of the new branches, those have come out of it. So that's generally what we've been spending the money on.
Okay, and is 1.2 million a good amount to have sitting in there? Is it more than we need, less than we need?
I think it's a healthy balance. I know we usually look at balance and take into account like the 10-year capital forecast and where that is meant to be spent and to see if the reserve is adequate. And I didn't check that this morning, so I apologize for that. But it was drawn down over time, but not to zero. I think it still had a healthy balance, but it wasn't at the $1.2 million level.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on this report?
So,
Joe?
just for clarity, so the surplus that we have this year is going into that reserve? Am I correct?
Yes. So the 1,247,000 that's shown in the report, that assumes that the 145,000 is in that number already. That's included in the 1,247,000.
Yeah, it just seems to me that that's a maybe overly healthy reserve to have right now. And you know, when we're still not up with the amount of hours that we would like to see, I just don't know why we would have that much money sitting there. I mean, if you have your 10-year, you haven't brought the 10-year capital plan to this meeting, I don't imagine.
No, I haven't.
It'd be nice to see that and see how the plan is to spend this money over the next while.
Yes, go ahead.
If I may make a comment, we do have a 10-year capital plan, and some of the items that are planned for in that plan include improved lighting, improved branch refreshes. We have a life cycle improvement whereby we know when carpet needs to be replaced, et cetera, and AODA. So we do have a 10-year capital plan. We'll also be replacing the library delivery van. And so I'm happy to share those plans with everyone if you are interested. And there was some conversation about New Wellesley location, New St. Clements location. So we do plan for a future life cycle improvements.
Okay. Well,
Actually, I'm not sure, sorry to interrupt, I'm not sure if you're interested, but I could share the 10-year capital forecast if you're interested in seeing that.
do you have it handy now, or should we have it for another meeting and maybe a broader discussion on that?
Yeah, I just kind of on what you're saying, Mayor Nowak. That was my concern about this whole report is I had to go digging back into budget stuff to see what the actual long-term plans are. again, I was reminded of what aggravates me, the Puttycombe estate just sitting there for multiple years in Wilmot, not being used. And I think that what I was going to suggest, granted as chair, I can't do, but I don't know if those at committee would be interested, would be deferring this report pending more holistic financial reports coming back to us. I think too, this goes back to, we made a clear request that we wanted to be more involved in the broader base budgeting as a committee of what happens in the libraries and how we're using those resources. And certainly when I look at $1.2 million sitting in reserve and think about every single person that complained to me about Wilmot's tax increase and the regional tax increase, I can't necessarily justify that because I don't know where we're going with it. I can appreciate, but even our capital budget, I'll be honest, with the one line saying, you know, for improvements to lighting, and then it has a budget somewhere into some date in the future. It's not very elaborate. I personally would like more in-depth information, and I think before I'm comfortable personally committing these funds to our capital reserve, I would like to understand more broadly where we're going with our spends and if it actually makes sense to put it into our capital reserves or if we should look at something else like investing into a pilot program for more staffing or something. That's kind of where I sit. But again, I as chair can't defer something, so I would leave that to committee as well as you guys disagree. But Mayor Foxton.
Thank you, and through the chair, I totally agree. We have just a day, we have several days where we go through an in-depth 10-year capital forecast. So I don't want to be a committee where we just rubber stamp what you say to us. And I want to be responsible. And I don't want, like, for example, you just talked about putting this into capital reserves. What do you define as capital reserves? Can that money be used to fund to use for extra hours? How do we budget the survey if we're going to go, and we are going to do the survey, I hope. So, yeah, defer, I will move to defer this until we have a fulsome view of the capital. Is there a negative to deferring this? Don't want to get like the region the other day. Is there a negative for deferral?
I'm not sure, but can I just comment that, like, so for instance, when we were developing the 2025 budget, if you felt that we needed to add additional expenses to the budget for, you know, more staffing or a survey or whatever, I mean, we could say potentially, and we did do this in the past, I think 2 years ago, we had said to reduce the overall cost of the budget, we took money out of the capital reserve, for instance. So, I mean, that is a possibility. I guess the other thing is too, you can see that in with the 2024 results, we had a large favorable variance on the staffing. So there is money there to be spent already in the budget for more staffing. So anyway, just FYI, I guess.
But I think we also want to see what the commitment is. See, if you see money sitting and you don't see how it's planned out for the future, you don't get a wholesome view. So I don't want to say, oh, look, we've got money, let's spend it on this, when it's already committed for a project 2 years down the road. So I need the whole picture. I need to make a good decision. We need to see the plan. So, and that's what I'm basically asking for. And so I will, if there's no reason that we couldn't defer, and I'm saying if we have to have a special library committee meeting in next month to look at this stuff, I think most of us would be willing to do that. Love how I tell you guys what we're doing. But so if that's a possibility, then I'd like to defer until we have a fulsome look at the capital budget.
And so time and place, are you suggesting, I mean, technically we're still in April, are you suggesting a May meeting or a June meeting?
I defer to staff on how quickly you want to pull this together. I would think the sooner the better so that we can close off the year end and get moving. So I would say May, but I defer to you because we need it for the auditors, right, Rod? And that, so by the May 7th meeting, didn't we have to have it? 15th.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the timelines are for closing off the for closing off the year. I would say also that I think that the library, I believe Carol can correct me here, but I believe that there is a policy in place to deal with the annual surpluses by putting them into a capital reserve and then allocating that reserve later in the year as part of your budget process. But certainly we can bring back the 10-year capital plan. I would also say that some of the other items that we've got on the agenda, including the development of an operating plan, all of these things can inform the decisions that you make as part of the 2025 budget for allocating the capital reserve over the next decade. I think certainly we do need to bring back more information for you and we can do that pretty shortly. I don't think, like, the capital plan is in place, so it might also be something that we could, email you out pretty quickly, right? But
I would like it emailed in advance, probably. I'd like a hard, is it the big spreadsheets?
No, it's a one page right now,
Okay,
but
okay. So that would be fine, but I also want an in-depth of line-by-line budget for the library committee this year, so that we know where funds are going instead of lump sums and which libraries are getting which.
yeah,
If I may, I'm being a real pain this morning, guys, sorry. So yeah, I will bow to whatever you think. If you think you can have it by May, and maybe double check with Craig Dyer of Finance, because May's 2 days away.
yeah.
A day away.
I think we just had a little conference here, and I think we can send you the capital plan by the end of the day tomorrow, and then set up a meeting to discuss it. At your convenience.
Did Craig say May 15th, and that's why he wanted it done May 7th?
Carol, can you look into the timing requirements for closing out the year end?
Excuse me.
So we currently have a motion to defer. I'm sensing that it's time-wise, May seems to be suitable.
Yeah, it should be on the deferral that we defer to, and a rough idea of what date we're going to choose. Or we can just say May, and then we can get the firm date once we hear from Finance.
If that works for everyone, just to leave it in May of 2024.
Correct.
Is there a seconder for that deferral? Seconded by Mayor Shantz. Did you want to speak to it as well?
Actually, with your indulgence, I have a question that doesn't really relate to the deferral, but it kind of does.
I'll pretend I don't know about Robert's rules and
Thank
let
you.
you make your comment.
The question is about reserves. So I think what I heard earlier is that we did take money from the capital reserve for operating. So is it truly a capital reserve? And is there another reserve that can be used? And you can either answer that now or bring it forward with the other information.
there's the library capital reserve, which has the 1.2 million, and then we also have the one that was from the Taylor bequest.
Right.
But other than that, we don't have any other reserves. And so, yes, in the past, not usually, but 2 years ago, we had said in the budget, we are going to take $200,000 because the tax increase was so high, to kind of lower that. And then when we set the 2024 budget, instead of having a $200,000 coming from the reserve, we said we were going to lower that to 100,000, and then hopefully at some point maybe reduce it further, depending on what the input from the council was on that. So we have used that. So yes, I guess it's not totally always been used for capital. That's true.
Okay, so there's really no restrictions on how we use that. I guess that's what I was getting at. Thanks.
Councillor Foxton, did you have another comment?
And also, forgive my ignorance, but I'd also like to know what a 1% tax increase is. Like I know what it is for the region and I know what it is for the township. What is it just for library? What does 1% equate to? Thank you.
With your indulgence, I would like to see the policy brought back as well regarding our reserves, Rod, that you were referring to. I think just so that we can make better decisions and understand all the documents that are governing us, that would be very helpful information to have present. Any other questions or comments on the deferral of this? Okay, seeing none, I will ask that you vote on eScribe, please. Very good, and that is carried. On to report number 5.2, and I will call on Cheryl Tilley, our Manager of Library Services, to introduce the report and the Memorandum of Understanding.
Thank you, Chair Solonen. This report, Maintenance of Library Facilities, first of all, we would like to sincerely thank all township CAOs and their staff for their assistance, support, and input on this massive project. There was an update that was sent out yesterday based on township CAO input that included some branch information that was modified. The term year in Article 2 was modified, and Article 3, the section on signage, was also modified to include township logos. And we have Rick to thank for that input. And I'm happy to announce that the first official exterior township library sign to have a township logo on it will be Breslau. I've put the order into our signage department, and it will proudly display the Woolwich Township logo next to the library logo and the region logo. The last agreement that was entered into between the region and the townships for library services and maintenance was in the year 2000, so we're looking at 24 years down the road. This new agreement will provide greater clarity, consistency between branches and townships. It reflects 2 years of consultation between the region and township staff. It addresses concerns that were raised in the KPMG service review, and it includes a mechanism for future review dates, so we will not go another 20 years before looking at this. So the report does have an appendix with it, with all the details included. It does feature standardization between whether a branch is standalone, whether a branch shares a footprint with a regional or a township building, and whether it actually shares a footprint with a third-party provider. So essentially, it's going to be an easier reference document for library staff, regional staff who service these facilities, and township staff, so we know who is responsible for what.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions, Council? Seeing none? Sorry, Sue, is that a question?
Can I ask for a deferral till May, along with the capital budget?
Sure. Did you want to elaborate on, you just want to see it in conjunction with the budget? Is that my understanding?
No, I just want to just check some legal things I want to check first.
Okay. Anything else, though, that you're expecting back from staff?
No.
No? Okay. I would need a seconder for that.
Uh-oh, there goes my ship, it's sinking.
It would be deferring it to the May meeting that we've now requested. Sue just wants to confirm some items. Okay, so seconded then by Mayor Nowak, and I will ask that you vote on eScribe.
How come you can bring up the voting for a lot faster than in council?
Okay, and that is deferred to the May meeting. Moving along to item 5.3, I'll call on Heather Woodley, our Supervisor of Library Technical Services, to make her presentation.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to provide you with a brief introduction to RFID and its application in libraries. Move the slides up, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is just a brief outline of what I'd like to cover today. So I'll start with a short review of what RFID is and how it works, along with some common applications that you're likely familiar with in your daily lives. I'll then go through opportunities that RFID provides to libraries in general, as well as more specifically the opportunities that we're interested in at the Region of Waterloo Library. And I'll wrap up by outlining the next steps that we plan to take with respect to RFID at RWL. Next slide, please. So RFID, or radio frequency identification, is a system made up of 3 parts. That is a data tag, a scanner or reader, and hardware and software. The RFID tag includes both an antenna and a microchip, which is either embedded into an item or embedded into another material, such as a sticker, and then attached to an item. The microchip in the tag can record and store data like a serial number, price, or library item barcode. The scanner or reader then captures the tag and reads the stored data. Computer hardware and software is then used to translate the read data into a format that can be used for further processing. So the diagram on the next slide illustrates how these 3 parts work together. So as you can see, the scanner or reader broadcasts a radio signal which is received by the tag. The tag then sends its stored information back to the reader. The reader is connected to computer hardware that is equipped with specialized software that translates the data from the RFID tag into a format that can be used by other databases for task completion, such as marking a book checked out in the library catalog. On the next slide, we can see some common ways that RFID technology is used in daily life. So debit card and credit cards with tap technology use RFID, as do microchips for pets. Automatic toll collection, like the transponders used on the 407, also make use of RFID technology. It is also commonly used in retail environments for tasks such as inventory control, theft prevention, and self-checkout. And of course, library tasks and services also make use of RFID technology, which we'll explore on the next slide. So firstly, RFID can assist in libraries with task efficiency. By automating repetitive staff tasks like check-in, check-out, and collection inventory, RFID allows staff to transition away from transactional activities and towards translational activities. In this way, staff can spend less time in front of a computer and more time with patrons, providing value-added services such as computer assistance, programming, and reader's advisory, all tasks that are best performed by a human and help build relationships and foster the community connections that library staff are so skilled with supporting. Secondly, RFID can assist with remote and after-hours services. One way that this can be accomplished is with book lockers. Book lockers can be placed outside of library buildings or in other community spaces. Patrons can access outdoor book lockers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with their library card to browse and borrow items or to pick up holds, which are then checked out from the system using RFID. Book lockers located inside other community spaces allow for low-cost and convenient ways to provide library service in remote and underserved parts of a library service area. Meeting patrons in spaces that they already visit as part of their daily lives, such as arenas, community centers, and airports. Some libraries, such as the Hamilton Public Library, even offer after-hours RFID-enabled card access to their branches to allow patrons to access the full collection and to check out items without staff present. And finally, RFID can help increase collection availability. When RFID-enabled items are returned, there is the opportunity for these items to be checked in immediately because the items do not need to wait for staff intervention to be made available for the next patron. They are moved on to the next available hold or are available for browsing and borrowing right away. This means that patrons have their desired items more quickly, holds lists may move faster, and wait times could be reduced, which could potentially result in collection budget stretching further because fewer copies will need to be purchased for high-demand items. There are multiple ways to accomplish improved collection availability through RFID, including the book lockers mentioned earlier, but also through RFID-enabled return carts and RFID-enabled return bins. The carts not only make items immediately available for borrowing upon return, but they also offer a low-effort marketing option. A recently returned cart is a great way to recommend popular titles for patrons without the need for staff intervention, thus allowing staff energy to be spent on more creative collection promotion work. And at the bottom of this slide, oh, sorry, can you go back for a sec? At the bottom of this slide, there's some examples of local libraries near the region of Waterloo, as well as the city libraries within the region who are already making use of RFID technology. So Region of Waterloo is focused on prioritizing public service while balancing that with our fiscal responsibility. And as such, RFID presents several interesting possibilities, the first of which is scalable, flexible outreach. The book lockers I mentioned earlier come in various sizes and are movable. So this would allow us to select appropriate outreach options for individual communities within RWL's catchment area and to relocate units if and when necessary to respond to changing community needs. RFID could also help us increase service availability. As noted with the previous slide, book lockers can be placed in a variety of locations, so patrons are not limited to accessing library services at our existing branch locations or within our open hours. This would provide an opportunity for patrons who don't have access to branches through public transportation or who keep schedules that are at odds with our current hours to access physical library materials. We would hope that this expanded service option would translate into increased membership and circulation. As mentioned on the previous slide, we are also interested in the potential more efficient use of our collections budget. More efficient turnover of materials has the potential to speed up our wait times for high-demand items, meaning fewer copies of popular titles would need to be purchased. This could potentially free up our collection budget to purchase more unique titles and expand the breadth of our collection. And finally, we're hopeful that RFID could help to enhance public service. As noted previously, RFID can reduce the amount of staff time spent on transactional activities, making staff more available to spend time connecting with patrons. This means task automation could result in increased relationship building opportunities with patrons as opposed to a reduction in staff position. And to be absolutely clear, any implementation of RFID at the Region of Waterloo Library would not result in the reduction of staff. So with all of these possibilities in mind, I'll outline on the next slide what our next steps will be with respect to RFID. So firstly, we'll want to establish our goals for what we would like to achieve in terms of public service to meet the needs of the communities we serve. And then we'd want to consider all possible options to achieve these goals. So, for example, there are book lockers that use RFID technology, but there are also book lockers that don't require RFID technology. So we'd want to consider both options as well as the pros, cons, and costs of each, and compare RFID options with their non-RFID counterparts. Next, we want to consider which opportunities presented by RFID-enabled technology make sense for our branches, for our patrons now and in the future. For example, many of you are probably aware that RFID makes self-checkout at libraries possible, but we want to ask ourselves if that particular application makes sense in our small rural branches. We'll also need to calculate potential cost per use and expected return on investment for any solution that we might proceed with. And finally, we'd want to determine which options and approaches are the best fit for RWL, complete an evaluation of the specific impacts that we may be likely to see. So just because RFID can have a particular benefit, we'd want to consider if we would be likely to see that particular benefit in our specific context. And with all that information in hand, we'd create a roadmap of how to achieve our goals. Once we had conducted the thorough analysis that addresses these questions, we'd plan to bring a report back to committee outlining our findings and recommendations.
Thank you very much for that. Are there questions at this time? Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Sounds wonderful, and as I'm picturing it, and then I'm thinking, so I've swiped to take out a book, I bring it back, it's swiped back in, but the staff's busy and haven't put it on the shelf, and the next person comes along that wants to swipe to take it out, it says it's in, but you're not sure where it is. So that I wonder about that problem. And that may be that I just don't know enough. And the other thing is, what did you call them, off-site ones? Lockers, the book lockers. And so would we be sending out staff to restock them and bring stuff back and that? So that may cause more staff plus vehicles. Have you seen these foot lockers? Are these book lockers before?
Through the chair. So I have not seen the book lockers in use in person. We conducted a request for information study last year where we received information from various RFID vendors to look at examples. So I've seen pictures, but actually Waterloo Public Library just launched book lockers earlier this year. So it's on my list of things to do to go check out what their book lockers look like, but they are being used in Waterloo region.
And that's fine. In a library setting, I could see it. But if you put it in some of these arenas or halls where people sort of run amok sometimes, I worry about the damage to them. Because, see, you've always got them supervised if they're in a library. There's always people there. But a lot of times when there's a big game, the entranceway or whatever could be completely empty of people. And then there's some wonderful children out there in the world that like to jump up and down on elevators to see if they can make it crash. And so that's my other concern is where we place it and how we place it. Sometimes it's nice to have eyes around it. I think it's a wonderful idea. Another thing, you listed all the cities that have them. Are they interchangeable? So if I took a book out in air and I use this system and I'm in Hamilton, could I drop it off in Hamilton and would you get it back?
So I'll address your last question first, if that's all right, and then I'll go back through the others. And if I missed anything, please let me know. So to address your last question, the book lockers are not interchangeable.
Okay.
So they, the RFID system that is part of the book lockers would be connected to the individual library's catalog software, just like our handheld scanners are currently in our branches. So you would be able to use a book locker with the card from your library corresponding to that book locker to borrow collections from that particular library. In terms of security, that's definitely one of the things that we'll need to address as part of our next steps investigations. As you noted, it is really important to make sure that that these book lockers and our other assets, whether it's after hours access or book locker access outside libraries or in other community spaces, it's important to make sure that they are safe and secure and we're not risking damage to our assets. So we'll definitely need to look at security as part of those investigations. And getting back to your first question about check-ins, it's true that until the book is put back on the shelf, even though it's checked in, it may sit in a bin until staff physically take it out of the bin and put it on the shelf. Larger libraries have automatic sorting systems that take care of that for them. That may be one of the opportunities with RFID that is not suited to our smaller libraries. But that's where the RFID-enabled checkout carts may be useful in our settings because returning a book and having it available is literally as simple as setting it on a cart. As soon as the book is set on that cart, the book is checked back into the system. It's on a shelf available for patrons. It's checked back in and noted that it's back in the Air Library, for example, and ready to be borrowed. And those carts can be out in the public spaces so patrons can come in, see what's been recently returned and borrowed again immediately.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions at this time? Mine is more so just a comment. Thank you for the great presentation. And you did kind of touch on, in your next steps, one of my big questions, which I just don't want to see us losing the personable part that's really valuable in our small community libraries. And I know that you'd said you guys will be looking at if the best fit is to go to fully electronic checkout or maybe have a hybrid. So I just look forward to seeing that in the report on a whole. But there were no questions from me other than thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I see no other questions. This report was just to receive for information, so we do not need to vote on that. And we will move along to item 5.4, and that I will call again on Cheryl Tilley, our Manager of Library Services, to introduce the Library Governance Report.
Thank you, Chair. With the library governance report, the question around governance was raised by the townships during the KPMG service review. As with the facilities maintenance agreement, this will be a joint effort between the region and township staff. The KPMG report identified 5 possible governance scenarios, including the status quo, but with the addition of community representatives. This particular report focuses on the status quo option with community representatives. And as you can see outlined in the next steps, we have an action plan for when the terms of reference, the groups that might be involved in creating that terms of reference, and it's very much a joint effort between township staff and region staff to create the new governance and the terms of reference.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the governance update at the moment? Okay, I'm seeing none. I did have a question of clarification. In the report highlight, I know that it identifies this committee as a standing committee of council. Rod, this might be a question for you. I think I'd really look to Matt too, but are we actually a standing committee of council, or are we just a committee of council? Or yes, sorry, to Tim as well, that might work.
Wonder who I can pass it to. So the procedural bylaw outlines the standing committees of council in which the library committee is listed, along with planning and works and community and health services, administration and finance, and audit, I believe, are the standing committees that are listed in the bylaw. That's a good question. I don't know if licensing is listed there, but I do know the library committee is listed in there.
It is.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm also curious, I know that we've had discussions around the table about having some members of the public join the committee. What exactly would be the process for us to do that? I know that you kind of outlined it, but I want to just understand concrete, what would we have to do if we wanted to see that happen, kind of next steps?
I think there's an opportunity. There are all of our committees that have members of the public that are involved have some sort of recruitment process. I think there's a little bit of flexibility about how that recruitment process works. I mean, in this particular case, it would be the recruitment of people from the townships, for example, right? Which would be different from our other committees. But that would be a process which would be outlined in the terms of reference. And I think we'd just make sure that, it was fair and open to the public and, was properly advertised, and that there was a selection process that the committee would go through for appointments that were made subsequently.
Perfect. Sorry, that part I knew because I know that you guys are coming back in August with the terms of reference, or that's the suggested date. I guess my point, do we need to pass a motion or anything for this? Because this report's just to receive for information. So I guess I'm wondering, what direction do you as staff need to go and form the terms of reference? Or are you just doing that on your own and you'll bring that back? That's what I was wondering.
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So I think we envisioned having an appointment from the townships to a small working group that would come back and bring a draft terms of reference for committee approval. And I don't think that's the first stage in that process is not a gigantic body of work and can be done fairly quickly. We had the conversation with the CAOs last week, and I think there was a view that it would be great to have maybe somebody like one of the township clerks participate in the group. And I know that the office of the clerk here has made has volunteered themselves to participate in the development of the terms of reference as well. So and that can be done fairly quickly, I think. Possibly even be brought back for the next meeting of the committee.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions then Seeing none, as I said, that's just to receive for information, so no need for us to vote on that. On to the council committee tracking list. That is also for information. Was there anything in particular that any councillors wanted to bring up or add to the tracking list at this time? No? Okay. Oh, sorry. It's okay. Mayor Foxton.
The one was that we receive, the one I put in there, the copies of the information that's going on between staff here and our CAOs, right? The communication. And that hasn't happened yet. It was supposed to happen in February of 2024. So I think we missed that date. Could we? And it just means giving us sharing with the mayors the copies of the minutes. That's all we're asking for, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, certainly. I mean, this can be done fairly easily. I think we had actually had an item on our to-do list to invite the library manager and director to regular CAO, township CAO meetings, and I think that we've been meeting pretty regularly over the last couple of months, so I think that's the next logical step. I believe it fell into under the category of strategic. A strategic integration was the phrase that was in the to-do list from the KPMG work. So, yeah, so we've had a couple of conversations about that, and it's just a matter of making a bit of time on the CAO agenda for that to happen.
All we're asking is that you send us a copy of the minutes. I'm sure you create minutes anyways, and you share them, so we would just like a copy. So we're aware of what's been said and going on.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Thank you. So once you do that, we can remove that item from the list.
Very good. Is there any other comments on the tracking list at this time? Seeing none. Any other business at this time? Okay. Seeing none. So our next meeting, we slightly changed plans midway through, and I have been informed that Commissioner Dyer is saying that we would need and he's online. I will just turn it over to you, Commissioner Dyer, opposed to me trying to paraphrase what you were going to say.
Thank you so much to the chair. We have, with the deferral of the admin and finance report from last week to May the 7th, we've now set up, we're in the process of setting up a special council meeting on May the 7th in order to, let's say, ratify what hopefully comes out of the morning meeting of A&F on the 7th. And so from a financial, let's say from a financial governance perspective, it would be extremely helpful to have the motion from today's report passed before A&F meets on the 7th. And if I understand, and I apologize for not being on the meeting sooner, and I do understand that there are some questions about the amount of money in the reserve, about the capital program. Those are all matters that can be dealt with at any time. And my advice to the library committee is that doesn't need to hold up the preparation of our 2023 financial statements. And so I would just ask, if there is some way that motion could be approved today so that staff could report back at whatever time the committee wishes with additional information around the amount in the reserve, what the capital program looks like, and any other financial information you think you need on a go-forward basis. Because this is basically just acknowledging that here's how 2023 ended, and then we can have further conversations as to what it looks like going forward. I hope that's helpful.
That is. Thank you very much for making time to pop on, Commissioner Dyer, and provide that information. I guess I'll look to library committee. I don't necessarily want to be the reason that we hold up financial statements for the whole region. Yes, Mayor Sean.
Yeah, I think that was part of our discussion, that we were hoping that this wouldn't hold up the financials. I wonder if we added a point C, because I think the bulk of our discussion at this point is around what happens with this year's surplus. So, and maybe Mr. Dyer, you can confirm too, it's listed to go into the capital reserve, which we understand is really very flexible, the library capital reserve, that it's been used in the past for all kinds of things. So can we add a point C that somehow indicates that flexibility? That we have the option to, maybe we don't need to. I guess I look to my colleagues or to Craig.
So through the chair, I would say that the capital reserve, has been used, I think, in a few different ways over the years. It's overall, I think we've used it, probably both from a stabilization perspective and a capital perspective. So if we take some of our larger services, like take water, for example, we have both a stabilization reserve and a capital reserve. And that's partly because of the scope of the service, the order of magnitude of the funds that we have. Typically with library, it's all been dealt with through one reserve. That being said, it's also that funding is there for use. I mean, it is up to the library committee to determine how it wishes to use that funding in the future. So from a staff perspective, I would say I don't think you need a Part C to this. That flexibility is there. And again, we can report back with options as to how to best use that reserve in the future.
Could we allocate that money to operating?
Through the chair, yes, you could. And I think it has been used in that manner in the past at times.
So I guess I'd look to my colleagues. Would you be more comfortable with that being just into the 2024 operating budget rather than into a reserve?
I think I don't want to make that decision until I see the capital thing. I think first we have to reduce the, I think I'd rather wait and see what the capital looks like, the 10-year capital forecast, before we make that decision. I'm okay with passing this. My question is, how do we reverse the deferral?
So I've learned, fun fact, if there's unanimous consent, we can just call the vote back, ignoring the date that we put in on the deferral. So that is something that we could do, and we could call back the vote today, should all four of us agree to do such, and then we can vote on it. So I guess I just want clarity that I'm interpreting this correctly. Commissioner Dyer, so if we were to vote and put it into our capital surplus now, but then after seeing the 10-year capital forecast plans and further discussion, if we decide to put it into operational for 2025, like that's not going to be limited by right now what we do by putting it into surplus capital?
Oh, absolutely not. All this is doing is setting the surplus money aside. How that gets used in the future will be subject to future decisions made by this library committee. And we can absolutely bring information forward with respect to what the 10-year capital plan looks like, how it gets funded, and what other appropriate uses might be for the money that's sitting in the reserve.
Okay, very good. With that new information, where were you 20 minutes ago, Commissioner Dyer?
Looks like he's somewhere nicer than here.
It does. Very good. With that, I would look, do we have unanimous consent to bring the vote back to right now? Yes? Yeah. Okay, very good. So I will take that without having to go through e-scribe. So now we will bring back the regular vote, which is the motion. It should be on your e-scribe now. And I would just ask you to vote how you choose. Oh, sorry, I would need a mover and seconder again. My apologies. I'm forgetting process completely here. Moved by Mayor Fox and seconded by Mayor Shantz. And please vote on e-scribe. And that carries. So, library committee will not be the reason that the municipality might be held up in their submissions for end of year. I suppose then I would look to staff. Can it be taken as direction that at our next meeting, we're expecting what was included in the deferral, so the information on the capital? And okay, great. So that's taken as direction that we will receive back. In that case, the suggestion prior to today's meeting was that the next meeting actually come back in June. Is that good with everyone, or would you rather stick with the May that we were discussing? Julie will send out times and sort out which specific time. Otherwise, historically, it wouldn't happen until August. So I'm seeing general consensus that June is sufficient. So no May meeting, we will do the June meeting with this additional information as well as whatever else you guys would like to bring forward or have on the docket to come forward. So that is agreed upon, and I would just ask to adjourn. If I could have a mover, moved by Mayor Noack, seconded by Mayor Shantz, and vote on e-scribe, I guess.